With Brett, and Tom is out today. We don't know where he is. He may be off and headed east, but we got a sit-in for him, and this is Cole with the Taxidermy University.
I feel like I've made the big time.
Shoot. No.
I apologize to everyone that tuned in wanting to look at a walleye today, and we're not doing walleyes, but I assume you'll be back on that soon enough.
Soon enough. They need a break.
That's
they definitely need a break. That might be why we did this, just because we had a little break in the action. But nope, Cole's going to work on a Bobcat and talk about a few different things. So I will turn it over to you and teach him something.
Sounds good. I'm sure most of you know Bobcats are one of the most difficult mammals there is to mount. Most predators are, but it seems like Bobcats are the ones that people struggle with the most. And there's a few little things that you can change on your Bobcat mounts that's really going to change the way they look. Most of it has to do with their eyes. And it seems like one of the first problems you run into with Bobcat eyes is most of the Bobcat eyes on the market aren't any good. They're just not accurate, and it's impossible to make, you know, a good Bobcat mount without eyes that are accurate. Some of my favorite eyes are the reflective eyes from Matuska. They have several different styles. They've got some that are flat back that are a little bit cheaper. They've got some that are capsuled on the back that actually give you a little bit more depth in the pupil and are a little more realistic. But all of them work really good. I generally just use the flat back because I think they look really nice, but any of them will work. Today we're going to use the flat back ones just because that's what I have in front of me. The reason these eyes, and I'll see if you can get a close-up of this. The reason these eyes are better, in my opinion anyway, is because the pupils are so short. In order to get a cat mount really look catty, you need a lot of iris, which is the colored part of the eye, underneath that pupil. Most of the cat eyes on the market have really elongated pupils, and it's really hard to get that cat look without any iris underneath that pupil. If you look at your reference, most reference pictures of cats, they have a shorter pupil. Even when they become really small with the light, they even when the pupil shrinks, it'll actually shorten. So you want as much of that iris showing at the bottom of that eye as you can. Another thing with most predators is they have what's called a shaded pupil, which is where this top eyelid actually touches or even partially covers that pupil. And that's what really gives them that predator look. If you don't have that top eyelid somewhat shading that pupil, that's when you get the really scared, wide open, almost like it's about to get hit by a car look that no one likes. So if you can do those two things right there, that will really make a big difference on what your cat mount looks like. So we've talked about the eyes. Like I said, the reflective eyes are really good. I believe Matuska also carries the pair Bobcat eyes, which also have a nice short pupil and are really, really accurate. The second thing you need to worry about is the angle of that head, which this one is set up on the mannequin correctly. Some of the Bobcat mounts or mannequins that you buy are not correct. What you'll run into is a lot of those heads are designed where the cat is looking down his nose, and a predator, when he looks, actually looks out across his nose. So if you look at reference, I think I've got a reference picture here kind of pulled up, which if you haven't seen these, Matuska carries a really good Bobcat reference book. In fact, they've got a couple. One of them is close-ups, and one of them is more overall look. But with this cat, we can really see the angle of his nose is almost pointed down, and the cat is looking straight out and not looking down his nose. So when we mount our cat, we want to make sure that our nose on our mannequin is angled down some. Which this mannequin has. If you look when he's set up here, he has that downward look, and he is actually going to be looking straight out. So the first thing we want to do when we set our eyes is to make sure that he's looking straight out. And to do that, we make sure that the back of our eye is perpendicular to the ground. So when I set this eye on here, sorry. When I set this eye on here, you can kind of see that it doesn't fit in there real good. It's a little bit tight. What I like to do is take all of this foam out of here. That way when I set my eyes, I have complete control of what I'm doing. So I'm just going to remove some of this foam. I'm going to try to do this where you can kind of see. And I don't want to destroy the sculpting that's there, but I do want to make some room to get this eye in there.
So you're removing material behind the eye orbit?
Yes, yes.
Gotcha.
The eye orbit is remaining there. I'm removing some material around the outside of it, kind of back behind it so we can get that eye in there. And then once we have it where the eye fits in there pretty loose, then we know we've got enough material removed. So I'm going to set this in here with a little bit of clay. I am going to dig out just a little spot right there for that clay to kind of stick in. I'm going to use oil-based clay when I do this. Most of the time, I would use critter clay when I'm setting eyes on any mannequin. But with this particular one, I'm using oil-based clay. And the reason I do that is when this dries, they're really touchy, and if they dry just a little bit wrong, you want to be able to go back and change that super easy. And by using this oil-based clay, it allows me to rehydrate that skin within 30 minutes, make the adjustments I need, and then let the skin dry. This oil-based clay will never get hard, but the skin over the top of it will get hard enough that you won't be able to move it once that skin's dry. So I'm just going to start by putting a little bit of clay there. Now, one thing we need to talk about is when setting bobcat eyes, a lot of it is about angle. So I use these acetate sheets. You can try to kind of do it just by look, but for me, these really help a lot. And one of the angles we need is the angle of the head from the top. So we're going to worry about basically, and let me think about this. We're going to worry about 3 basic angles. One of them is going to be the 90-degree angles perpendicular from the ground. One of them is going to be from the top. We're going to want them canted outwards just a little bit. So instead of the eye being straight, I don't know if you can see that very well, we want that eye to be canted out about 10 degrees. And then the last angle you need to worry about on a bobcat eye would be the pupil itself is actually going to be canted inward at the top about 10 degrees. That's usually the last angle I worry about. I worry about the first 2 first. So we're going to set our eye in here. And I'm going to have to turn it around so I can see it to make sure that we're perpendicular from the ground. But that's the first thing I check, is to make sure that we're perpendicular, and we're not. We need to build it out just a little bit on the bottom here. Okay, so that's pretty close. So you can see that, and that's one thing I like about these white banded eyes, is the iris and then the white band, which would be the sclera. The separation there, you can really see that it's straight up and down, which is what we want. So the second angle I worry about would be from the top. When we look at it from the top, we want it canted about 10 degrees outward. So I've got enough clay back there that I should be able to just push it a little bit and get that cant in the eye.
So he's not looking straight forward like headlights.
Their eyeballs are not looking straight forward like headlights. They do have a little bit of a cant to them. Yeah. I think that's pretty close. I don't know how well it shows on the camera, but there is a little bit of a cant to that eye. It is not looking straight ahead. And then the last angle I worry about is going to be the angle of that pupil. I want it angled in at the top about 10 degrees. So I'm just going to give it a little turn, maybe. And now we've got that pupil angled at about 10 degrees in. So, and then I will double check it again. I'll check it from the side, make sure that we're about 90 degrees. I'll check it from the top, make sure that it's angled outward a little bit, and I'll check it from the front to make sure that that pupil is at about 10 degrees. Now that is the easiest eye to set because there was nothing we had to match. The tricky part comes when you have to match the other side.
So doing a demo, you always do one.
Exactly.
And give it to the other guy to do the other one. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm teaching classes, it's really easy for me to set one.
Yep. Now, when you talked about the pupil, and just for the camera, the pupil is not necessarily round. Looking at the camera
Correct,
view.
yeah. Bobcats have kind of an oblong pupil similar to a fox.
Yep.
So,
and you've got the axis of that pupil is what we're talking about canting in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that'll cant in.
Yep.
Just looking at the camera.
We will try to set the other one real quick. Again, I'm going to take out just a little bit of foam. Most of it is going to be in the front. One really good measurement to take, and I do take this measurement on all my cats, is from front corner to front corner. Some mannequins get a little bit wide, some are a little bit narrow, and you can really screw up the look of a cat's face by having the eyes too close together or too far apart. So that is a really good measurement to take. I caliper that, write it down on my sheet, and then I usually make sure that that's what I've got when I go to set my eyes. Since I don't have a skin, this isn't an actual mount, I'm just going to go off of what the mannequin was. I'll make a little bit of room back there. Let's see if I can fit the eye in there. Yep. So again, I'm going to take a little bit of this oil-based clay. Now this oil-based clay, if you've never used it before, it's pretty hard and you really need to work it in your hands and use some friction to warm it up, to soften it up. Once you've got it softened up, I'll set it in there. Make sure my pupil's kind of close before I get started. I'll make sure it's straight up and down, perpendicular from the ground. And then from the top, I'm going to make sure that it's canted outward some. And then from the front, I'm going to make sure that my pupil is canted inward at the top. Now once I have that done, this is an acetate sheet that I actually bought, but you can make one. You can just get a clear sheet of plastic and draw some cross lines on it just so you can get it where it's nice and square. And I'm going to check a couple things with this when I use it. The way I use it, and it's going to be tricky because I'm trying to do it by looking at the camera and not actually looking at what's going on here. The way I'll use it is I will set it over the face of the cat, and I will make sure that the center line runs right down the center of the mannequin. And then one of the cross lines, I will raise this or lower it, whatever I need to do. And I want to make sure that I have these pupils at the same height. Another thing I want to check, and this one actually has the 10-degree lines on it, which if you wanted to check your pupil angles, you can. I usually just eyeball those. I just want a little bit of a cant in at the top. But if you wanted to check that, you could. But you can use these to check the distance from the pupil to the center of the bridge of the nose. Now, I'm sure this isn't lining up on camera, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. So once I know that each one of these eyes is the same distance from the center of the nose and that the angles are right, then I will actually start building some eyelids on there.
Nice. That's a handy tool. Very, very handy.
Now, I will say when you build eyelids on one of these, I just forgot what I was going to say. No, I didn't. When I build eyelids on one of the, I should mention one more thing. There is one more thing I check, and that is that each eye is the same distance from the nose. You don't want one eye further forward than the other, which I actually do have one of these a little bit further forward than the other. But since we're not mounting it, I'm not going to worry about it. But if I was mounting this cat, I would take a little bit of foam out and make sure that eye got further back into that mannequin so it matched.
Do you have just a rule of thumb for depth?
Not I don't really. I just kind of eyeball it. I mean, you can look at your reference. You do want the eye to extend, you know, past that eye socket a little bit, sure, but you don't want them super bulgy.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. So I really don't. I just kind of eyeball it.
Got it.
Sometimes it's really difficult for me to tell if I've got a good eye set without putting eyelids on it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm quick to put eyelids on it, and if I don't like the way it looks, then I will rip it back apart and start over. Yeah. So when you do eyelids on one of these, I think I'll try to do the left eye, which is backwards for me. Usually I start on his right eye, I guess I'm going to do first. We're going to do the bottom lid first, and if you look at your reference, cats have an extremely round bottom lid. The lowest part is usually about in the middle, and they're really, really round. So I'm going to start just past the front corner of the eye. I'm going to kind of lay some clay on here, and I'm going to make a nice round bottom lid and then just pinch off what I don't need up there. A good rule of thumb is I try to kind of follow the line between the iris and the sclera. I know that's a nice round shape, so I try to just follow that with my clay work. And then I will start to kind of blend this clay into the mannequin, just with my fingers. Now this oil-based clay does not smooth out quite like the critter clay that you're probably used to. It does no good to get it wet, so we're basically going to have to just deal with it how it is. These rubber brushes that Matuska sells are really, really good for shaping this clay. So I will take that rubber brush and just kind of give it the shape around the eye that I want, which is basically just a nice round shape.
That's a good point too, because these reflective eyes are acrylic, so metal tools would be, you do run the risk of scratching the eye, so the rubber tool is very nice.
So I'm going to roll out another piece of clay. This is way more than I'll need, but I'm going to use part of it. And I'm going to lay this on the top lid. Now, when we look at our reference, you will notice on most mammals, whether it be deer, coyote, whatever, but bobcats are no exception, the back corner of that eye is higher than the front corner. And that is the case with most mammals that we mount. So when I lay this top lid on there, I really want to make sure that I've got this back corner higher than the front. If we don't, we will get a really sleepy-eyed looking cat. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start down in front of the front corner, and I'm going to work my lid up over the top. Kind of look at your reference and try to match that shape as best you can. And then I'm going to thin that lid down a little bit too. I had it a little bit thick. When you skin a cat, really pay attention to how thick their eyelids are. They're not very thick at all. So I don't want to get it too thick. And looking at my reference here, I'm really going to try to shape this front corner to match. And notice that my eyelid just touches the top of that pupil. And that's going to give it that cool predator look. I'm going to look at it real quick here. I need to bump that up a tiny bit. All right. So we're pretty close there. That is probably about what I would do if I was going to mount this cat. And then any of the fine tuning adjustments that we make would all be done after the skin is on it. So real quick, we will just go ahead and do our other eyelid here. And again, I'm going to start on the bottom, starting down in front of the front corner. I'm going to follow where the iris meets the sclera, just that round shape at the bottom of that eye. And then I'm going to pinch off the excess at the top, what I don't need. And then I will roll out a little bit for the top eyelid. And there you can see, just with that rough shape there, without any tooling at all, our back corner is higher than our front corner. And then we can kind of start to fine tune our shape a little bit and get that looking a little bit catty. Now obviously if you're doing a cat that's sleeping or something, your eyes would be a lot more closed, but I think you'll find even with a cat with his eyes almost completely closed, the back corner is still going to be higher than that front corner. Alright, I think we're kind of close there. So you can kind of see we've got a pretty good cat eye shape. This particular mannequin, which is the shoulder mount mannequin that you guys sell, it has these eye whisker bumps sculpted into the mannequin. That's fine. I'll be honest, most mannequins don't have that I use, so I will actually put those on myself, and I do that through the skin when I do them. Yep. So I put the skin on it, I'll roll out a little pea-shaped ball of clay like that, and I'll actually insert that through the skin. That way I know I'm getting it right underneath that whisker bump that's on there. So, but that is setting eyes. A couple other things about cat faces that, that people get incorrect quite a bit would be the ears and the ear placement and the ear shape. If you use the ear liners, that really helps with your ear shape. That gets that correct for you. But if you use Bondo, then you really just have to follow your reference and make sure you're getting a good ear shape. I commented to Brett earlier when I was playing with this mannequin how well it actually fit these Celastic ears. When I lay it on there, it automatically lays that ear pretty much the right angle and depth and everything that I want. But there's a couple things to look for on ears. From the front, if you draw a straight line from the outside of that nose through the front corner of that eye, it almost always hits right here on the inside edge of that ear. So if you look at your reference, and I've got some here, if we draw a line from the outside of that nose through the front corner of that eye, it lines up with where that ear attaches to the top of the head. Even when their ear goes back, you can still tell where that ear attaches at the top of the head, and it still lines up with the outside of the nose and the front corner of that eye.
That's really helpful because a lot of times it seems like you see troubles with the eyes and then troubles with the leading edge of the ear, either too far apart or too narrow.
They're almost always too far apart because there's so much skin up there.
Yep.
And when you put them where they belong, you're thinking, what am I going to do with all this skin? If you've ever seen a hairless cat, all that skin is all wrinkled and bunched up on top of their head. Like they have a lot of wrinkles up on top of that head. So that is probably one of the biggest things I see is the ears just being too far apart.
Sure.
Another thing that I see a lot with these ears, it would help if I used the right ear. Well, that was the right ear. What am I having trouble with here? All right, there, okay. Hard to do everything backwards. Another thing I see a lot with ears is they will be too flat in the front. Those ears sit on that head at an angle. So if you look at that Bobcat from the profile, you can actually see inside his ear. Like you can see the hair and stuff inside that ear. That's because that ear is not pointing straight at whatever it's listening to. It actually sits on that head at an angle. So if you look at it from the top, so if you look at this ear from the top, you can actually see that it sits kind of at an angle. It does not point straight ahead. And one way we can see that in our reference is if we, let me see if I can find, I had one pulled up and I think I've pulled my marker out here. If we look at a profile of a cat on our reference, you can see inside the ear. And that shows that that ear is not sitting straight, it is sitting at a bit of an angle. So another thing to do when you mount your cat, which camera are we on? Are we on the big one? All right. When you mount your cat and you have his ears, I probably should have grabbed the T-pin so I could just pin them up here. Here, you hold that
That can
one.
be your T-pin.
Yeah, you hold that
There
one,
you
I'll
go.
hold this one. All right. Another way to tell if you've got them set correctly is you can lay a straight edge across the front of those. And if that straight edge hits all 4 parts of the ear, then it's incorrect. Your straight edge should only hit the inside edges. The outside edge should be back. And that's true with a lot of mammals too, not just bobcats.
So
In fact, most of everything we're talking about today would work for coyotes, would work for foxes, really any predator. They all have that similar ear set and similar eye set.
So that ear angle might be similar to the eye angle. They're
Yeah.
not straightforward,
Yep.
but 10 degrees or so.
Exactly.
Very cool.
And you can kind of see a lot of this on your reference pictures. One thing that we have not talked about yet is underneath this nose, the skin. When you skin your cat out and you go to mount it, there's actually a lot of bare skin underneath that nose. When you look at live reference and when you go to mount it, you'll notice that these whisker pads are actually fur to fur. There's no skin showing. So when you go to mount your cat, you will need to cut a little tucking groove underneath that nose and tuck that skin in so that it is hair to hair and there's no skin showing on a closed mouth cat. Now when a cat opens his mouth, that changes. It opens up and you can actually see that skin. What else have we not talked about on a cat head?
You were mentioning ears. What do you do for that secondary little split on the, it's got a name.
I should have looked
and I'm
that
not
up.
gonna-
I knew the name and I can't think of it right now. Yeah, the second little ear, I usually open that up with a scalpel as slowly as I can, and I usually just put a little piece of critter clay or something
Yeah.
like that in there and kind of give that some shape.
Sure.
And then when you put your skin on your ear liner, if you're using liners or even if you're using Bondo, I will actually form that one separate.
Yep.
And make sure there's a little bit of separation in there.
Got
And then
it.
it'll need finished inside there too. They're pretty fleshy down inside there, and then the outside edges are pretty dark. So usually a little bit of flesh color in that tab, and then hit the outsides with some darker brown.
All kinds of little trouble spots on these cats. There's such a small space that a 1/16 of an inch one way or the other really makes a difference.
Exactly. One thing I do see that a lot of people do incorrectly is they don't get that skin taxied far enough forward. In order to get that nice round shape of a bobcat's head, you really need to push all of that skin forward until you get that nice full face that a cat has.
Secondary auricular cartilage.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
what it is.
That stuff. Thanks, John. Thank you, John. You know that you had a side profile, and speaking about the shape of the head and bringing that skin forward, that's another one that people can look at from the side. You can see those, oh gosh, here we go for names again. This tuft of skin on the side. Seems like people tend to pull it up and bring it way up and around and pull it back, as opposed to bringing it down, relaxing the skin, and bringing it forward. That's another profile angle you can look at, how all those whiskers come together.
And by pushing everything forward, you're also going to find it dries down a lot better because that skin's not wanting to pull and move on you.
Not so
So
tight.
another thing that you see a lot is whiskers that are just discombobulated, laid back. If you look at reference pictures, those whiskers really flow nice off of that cat's face, and they don't cross a lot. They're pretty smooth, and they all look kind of perfect. There's different ways you can tackle that. You can, when you're prepping your skin, you can go through and actually clean around each one of those whisker bulbs, and then lay some good thick hide paste on there. I use Pro 1 hide paste, and I'll usually dig like the side of the bucket where it's really thick and starting to dry, and I'll use that and kind of pack it in between those whiskers, and that gives you some adjustment where you can move those. Recently, what I've been doing is just removing those whiskers altogether and really smooth, get it nice and thin in that whisker pad, mount it, and then once it's completely dry, I'm replacing each one of those whiskers back in there, which is really not that hard to do. You just put a little T-pin in there, and I actually put all of the whiskers in, or all of the T-pins in first, so I kind of have an idea of the shape of them and the angle, and then I'll pull each T-pin out one at a time, dip the whisker in a little bit of super glue, and just put it right in that hole that T-pin was in. Yeah. So optimizers work really good when you're doing that, because it's a little bit tedious. But it does lend for a much fuller looking whisker pad, and I do think they look better. And the whisker pad itself, not just the whiskers, dries a lot smoother if you don't have those bulbs underneath there.
Definitely. Yeah.
So.
For those just tuning in, you are with Cole and Brett, and we are actually doing a live giveaway today. So if you share this video right now, you're in the chance to win one of Cole with Taxidermy University's DVD. He has Bobcat, Bobcat 101, which is a full DVD series to show you what to do. And he just came out with a new one, which is Mounting a Fish 101 with Jimmy Lawrence. And so we're going to give one lucky winner at the end of the show their choice at one of those DVDs. So make sure to like.
It's always making me give away free stuff.
Make sure to like and share this video for your chance to win, and we will do the live drawing at the very end.
That's pretty cool.
We've made it this far with no Bobcat questions? Just John Belushi showing off, that was it?
Just who's form is that?
Oh.
Yeah.
It is. I've mounted on it. It mounts up really, really nice.
It does.
So.
Very nice.
Let's see some ears.
Some ears? We just did the ears. Oh, okay.
Now you're on the spot.
So normally I would use critter clay for this, but since I don't want to open up a brand new box of critter clay, we'll just use the oil clay that we've got. So like I said, these actually work really good. They kind of just sit in here where they go on this particular mannequin. If you're using a mannequin that does not have this cut out, you're probably going to have to cut that out yourself. And that way you can get them to really seat in there nice. But since this one sits on there pretty good, we're going to go with that. And I'm just going to take a little bit of clay and just kind of press it up against that ear just so it'll stick to this form, and then press it down on there. I'm going to have to look at it from the front here just to make sure I'm kind of where it belongs. That's pretty close. So the skin will kind of roll off of this head right down into this ear canal. So if you're not getting that nice smooth transition, you may have to remove a little bit of clay. This one seems to fit really, really well, so we don't have that issue. This is not that big a deal for commercial work, but if you're competing, there is basically a little tendon that goes from the front of this ear edge down onto the head, and you'll want to rebuild that. I generally just use a little bit of clay and rebuild it with that. It's really, really thin. And it just kind of sits on the top of that head at an angle just like that. And then for their ear butt, when you skin it out, you'll notice they don't have a lot back there. There's not a whole lot of meat, so we don't want to do too much. But we do kind of want to fill this area in a little bit and blend that into our ear liner. And especially underneath it here.
Nice.
But that is how I would tackle using ear liners. Now, if I'm using Bondo, I would basically do the exact same thing. It would just, most of it would be done, you know, through the skin with the clay in there. This little leading edge is tricky to get with Bondo ears. You can do it, but you just got to get the clay up in there and really shape it through the skin. It is, if I'm doing a competition cat, I would set most of this up with epoxy sculpt so it would be really rigid, and then I would cut the ear off of it, which I do go through that in the competition Bobcat video. I would cut the ear off of it, and then it will plug right back in where I've cut it out.
So you do preset your ears when you do
yes.
a competition?
Yep.
Nice.
That way I can really fine tune them and get them exactly where I want them. So.
Gotcha.
Craig is wondering if you can talk about setting a replacement nose.
Okay. Replacement noses, when I'm using a replacement nose on a predator, like say a coyote, bobcat, fox, you really don't set them any different than you would any other nose. You're going to I usually try to just kind of hold it up there and determine how much I need to remove. And I remove that foam, and then you can put your replacement nose on there, and you can blend that with some epoxy sculpt or clay or whatever you want to do. If I am using a replacement nose with a coyote or a fox or something like that, I always leave the skin on my skin. I don't cut the nose off of my skin.
Sure.
I'll flesh it really, really good, flesh those wings out really good, and I will lay the real skin over the top of that artificial nose on the mannequin.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is it's so hard to make it look real for one, and mainly to finish this seam on the top of that nose. All that hair grows up and it's just bare skin, and it's really tricky to try to blend that and get it to work. Yeah. With a bobcat, the hair grows the opposite direction. The hair on a bobcat nose grows down, so it actually covers that seam up. So you can get away with using the cast nose on a bobcat and actually cutting the skin off of, or cutting the nose off of your skin and just having the replacement nose show. Yep. And then the finish work is pretty minimal. There's some finish work inside the nostrils, and that's about it. It butts up really, really nice, and the hair kind of covers up the top of that cast.
Nice.
So when I do replacement noses with a cat, I actually use the plastic nose and have that show. One thing you will notice when you're looking at your bobcat reference, this is another thing I see a lot, is the hair actually kind of goes into that nostril a little bit. A lot of times I see guys using replacement noses and they've got all this black plastic out here that they've butted their skin up to. You really, if the nose you're using has that, you really need to grind some of that plastic off of there and get where you can tuck some of that hair up into the nostril just a little bit. It dips in to that nostril. This cover shot really shows it. You can see how that hair, let's see, which way do I need to go here?
The other way.
This way?
Yes, right
All
there.
right, that'll work then. You can see where that hair really goes up into that nostril. And it's just going to give you a lot cleaner, more realistic look. I would say another thing that I hadn't touched on, when you're tucking eyes, pay close attention to the amount of black skin that shows at the bottom of that eye. There's quite a bit of black skin there, and sometimes it's hard to tell how much of that you need to tuck. It's a really, really thin ridge of black that shows, and it's not really black, it's dark brown. There's a really, really thin ridge of skin that shows there. So when I mount one, I make sure that I'm not showing too much. And the same with this front corner, there's not a whole lot of black skin showing there. So I really want to taxi this skin up and taxi this skin down and try to narrow the amount of skin that's showing in the front corner. That'll also keep it from drumming when it dries. That's a good tip on deer too, is to really make sure you get that skin pushed into the front corner. Yeah. So.
Is there a
color scheme that you try to stick with on which colors to use for your bobcat faces with the eyes and the nose?
Their skin is pretty dark. So I mean, I will start with some flesh tones to try to even it out. I like a pretty even canvas when I start painting. So I do use a lot of flesh tones around the eyes and inside the ears, but I come over that with a dark brown, and then it's just a really black brown basically, and I'll hit all my skin areas that are dark with that dark brown. For the noses, Mars Red and Bass Belly White has always been my go-to. Like I generally just mix those two. If it's a little bit redder nose, especially if it's an earlier season cat, I'll do more Mars Red. If it's later in the year, a little more of the white and like tone it down a little bit. and then I'll finish that off with some dark brown. The top of the nose usually has a little dark brown line on it, and then every now and then you'll get a cat. I don't know if you got a close-up. This one here has one. Every now and then you'll get one where they'll have a little spot on their nose. Like this one's got a little spot. Some of them will have 3 or 4 spots. You can do that. If you really start looking at your reference pictures, you'll notice that they can be really, really different.
Oh, yeah.
Like this one here is really dark with a lot of spotting and stuff. Yeah. I can go back over all that. This one here's got a lot of really dark spotting, and it's a pretty muted tone. Where this one here is probably a little earlier in the season, or at least a little warmer outside. He's really red, but he does have one little black spot there. It's a neat touch to go ahead and add that to a customer cat, especially if it had it to begin with.
Yeah.
So I will do that sometimes.
And we've got a kit a pan pastel kit specifically for cat noses that we've put together that really helps. They do some real fine detail and stuff, and there's such a wide variety of colors. We had to choose this color or that color. Was tough to do because there's looking at reference pictures, there's so many different colors.
There really is. They can be really different for sure. So, and some of that detail stuff, especially with the pastels, really works good if you're going to be in the competition room.
Yeah.
Because the judge is going to be inches from it. So seeing all that depth and all those different colors really makes a big difference.
So for those just tuning in, you're with Cole and Brett, and they're talking Bobcats. Comment in any questions that you guys have. They're more than happy to answer them for you. While that's happening, for those that are XP Extreme Precision Whitetail Deer fans, we have 2 new ones available right now. The XP UR 346, it's an upright, it's 7.5 by 19 by 21, and it's a left turn. It is hot off the molding and ready to go out the door. And then the Sneak 366, it's a 7 3/4 by 20 by 22 left. I know there's a lot of people calling in for those. Let us know, and they're ready to go. Make sure you share. I'm gonna do one more look here in about 2 minutes for new people sharing this video, but Cole and Matuska's has teamed together to give away to one lucky winner a Bobcat 101 DVD, or their choice
Competition Bobcat.
competition, or their choice of the new Mounting a Fish 101. Why don't you tell us a little about those 2 DVDs that you have there,
for
Cole?
sure. I think you've got the fish one over there on top. We're really excited to come out with this new DVD. I teamed up with Jimmy Lawrence, which if you don't know, Jimmy Lawrence is one of, if not the most knowledgeable fish people I know. He literally studies fish reference every day of his life. I don't know how he does it. It would drive me nuts. But he is the biggest fish head I know, and he's super talented.
Yes, he
is. We teamed up and made this DVD. It's a long one, I'll warn you. It's 5 discs, so you're going to want to pop a lot of popcorn. But it really is, it has to be the most detailed fish DVD that's ever been made. It takes you from, picking a good specimen, skinning the fish. He actually templates it and carves his own body. So if you're new to that, or if you haven't tried that, it's really detailed, and he goes into a good explanation of how he goes about doing that. We tan the fish, mount it. We do all of the epoxy finish work, and then paint it. He paints one of the best bass there is, I think. I really like looking at Jimmy's bass. So, but yeah, this is a really cool DVD for anyone that is even considering getting into fish taxidermy, or anyone that's been doing taxidermy or fish taxidermy for a long time that really wants to step up their game. He does a good job of explaining anatomy. It's a really, really good DVD. It's probably one of my favorite ones that we've done. So that is a good one that is a must-have. I don't know that the Bobcat one's a must-have as much because I'm in it and I'm boring to listen to. But yeah, this DVD goes over a lot of what we talked about today, except in a lot more detail. We do molding and casting the feet and show you how to do that. We set ear liners similar to what we've done here. I do set a replacement nose on it, and we mold and cast the tail.
Wow.
Like, we really go into detail that you probably wouldn't do on a competition, that you wouldn't do in your normal commercial shop. But for a competition, there's a lot of really cool tricks and stuff in here. So
very cool. Very cool.
And apparently we're giving one of those away.
One lucky share.
And do they get to choose which one they
Yes,
want?
they do. They get to
Oh,
choose
that's pretty
the
cool.
bobcat, or are you a fish person, or
They
want to
don't-
get better at one or the other?
They don't
So
want me choosing.
we will draw here in just a second. I do have one question going back to the bobcat.
Yeah.
How much do you Dremel out the nostrils?
If I were using the real skin over the top of this foam and I was going to Dremel out the nostrils, I actually over Dremel them a little bit
Sure.
and then fill them with clay. And then when I mount it, I kind of shape that nostril interior with my tool into the clay. So basically I'll Dremel out quite a bit and then just pack it with clay and go from there. And I usually put just a little bit of clay over the top of the nose as well, but most of all the detail is done just with my tool into the clay inside that nose.
Perfect. Jeff Gibson would like you to bring him back some carving clay.
Okay.
Carving clay.
All right, so we will, cat ears. All right, cat ears, paint or pastels for finish work?
Both. I would suggest using both. I lay my base colors with the paint, but you can really get some cool modeling and effects like that with those pastels over the top of it. That dark brown pastel inside the ears really looks good over the top of a muted flesh
It does.
tone.
Yeah, it does. That's a great answer.
So I would definitely use both.
Right, you ready to draw for the winner?
I can
of
do
one of
it.
Your DVDs?
All right.
One lucky winner is
Johnny Rico.
Johnny.
Old Johnny Rico won something.
Congratulations, Johnny.
Hey, Rico, congratulations.
So does he have to choose live right now?
No, we'll put it, we will put
You're
it
gonna
on his
make me
account. You
lose
can
to
pick
Jimmy
his
on
next one.
live TV? You can't pick Jimmy
that's
over
funny.
me in private?
So just a big thank you to Cole for coming out and doing this. Tom's out of town, so it worked out well because someone has to take his seat, you know.
Yeah, he heard I was coming, so he bugged out.
He
I'm
got
pretty
scared. He got scared. So a huge thank you. And again, if you guys are looking to up your game, Taxidermy University DVDs are a big step in the right direction for that.
There's a whole bunch of them too.
Yes. So next week, I think they're going back to fish. So for all you fish people, they are back at it next week. Tune in, and we will catch you. Thanks for tuning in. You can call us 1-800-488-3256 or visit us online at www